Welcome everybody. My name's Lauren from the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and today we've got guest speaker Valerie from Positive Solutions that is going to take us through a session around professional supervision. But I'll let her introduce herself now. She's having trouble with her camera, but we can hear her and we can see her presentation. So we're good to start whenever you are, Valerie.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And yes, I'm really sorry that you won't be able to see my face today. I'm not quite sure what's happened there with the gremlins, but welcome to this presentation on professional supervision. Before we start, in recognition of the deep and unique history and culture of this island, Lutruwita, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to all Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the traditional custodians of the land upon which we are meeting. My name is Valerie Matsumoto. I am the Service and Innovation Coordinator at Positive Solutions. I'm also a nationally accredited family dispute resolution practitioner, a workplace mediator, a conflict coach, and a professional supervisor. I've worked in the field of dispute resolution since 2004, and I first trained in supervision in 2015 with Amavita, and have facilitated supervision to individuals and teams across many workplaces since that time. It's really a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, either by unmuting yourself or through the chat function. And also we'll have a Q&A at the conclusion if you've got any questions. Just a little bit about Positive Solutions. Who are we? We're a not-for-profit organisation that has been providing conflict resolution services across Tasmania since 1991 and EAP services since 2015. We have offices in Hobart, Launceston, Burnie and Devonport. And we provide a range of services that can support the workplace, including family dispute resolution, employee assistance counselling, private counselling, psychological services, workplace mediation, community mediation, professional supervision, conflict coaching, and training and development. So what is this presentation about? I would really like to talk about how supervision fits with the management of psychosocial risk factors. And about the purpose and aims of supervision and an explanation of what supervision is not. So often there's a community misconception about what supervision is and rather what it's not. I'd like to talk about the qualities of a good supervisor, the modes of supervision that are possible, and the modalities and theories that supervision draws from, how the service and the sessions are structured, and the barriers and benefits to supervision. So talking about psychosocial risks and hazards, psychosocial hazards can cause psychological and physical harm. So broadly speaking, psychosocial hazards are generally caused by factors in the design, management and characteristics of work and exposure to harmful behaviours. On average, work-related psychological injuries have longer recovery times than physical injuries. They have higher costs and they require more time away from work. Managing the risks associated with psychosocial hazards not only protects workers, it also decreases the disruption associated with staff turnover and absenteeism, and it may improve broader organisational performance and productivity. Supervision can assist supervisees to manage all aspects of risk at work, but it's particularly effective in helping with psychological well-being to assist people to remain buoyant. So how do we make a plan around psychosocial risks? Supervision obviously can't eliminate all the variables in psychosocial risk, but it can offer support and strategies to individuals to manage the workplace experience and to remain solution-focused and engaged. So consider how you as a workplace are currently responding to the psychosocial hazard legislation and how adopting a supervision practice in your workplace could benefit you and mitigate the risk. Let's have a look at these psychosocial risks. So high job demands and low job control. So unrealistic workloads or unpredictability, shift work that does not allow recuperation time, and jobs that require high and sustained vigilance. Poor support and lack of role clarity is a lack of perhaps a supportive manager or a supportive team to debrief with, lack of access to proper resources for the task, floppy boundaries around role and responsibilities, and constantly changing parameters. Poor organisational change management. Changes are not implemented or communicated accurately or in an inclusive manner. Inadequate recognition or reward can mean that acknowledgement is not congruent with efforts, or feedback is either non-existent or only negative. Poor organisational justice can mean that internal procedural systems for addressing incidents of concern are not understood, accessible, or applied consistently. Exposure to traumatic events or material is often unavoidable in some roles. For example, for frontline workers such as police and paramedics, exposure is a daily occurrence. Remote or isolated work can lead to a lack of access to both communication and resources. Violence and poor physical environments are spaces that are not suitable to the task. I once had a cupboard designed for me to work out of in a workplace, and I still hold the memory of trying to manage work out of a cupboard that faced a dark wall. Violence and aggression can come from either colleagues, clients, customers, or patients, and it can be verbal or physical. And bullying and harassment can include any kind of targeted or unreasonable behaviour. Conflict or poor workplace relationships, can mean all sorts of challenges in terms of harassment. Poor communication can be frequent and unresolved problematic interactions, or intentionally excluding somebody. So looking at WorkSafe Australia's Code of Practice diagram here, the third step in WorkSafe's recommended management and process around psychosocial hazards is to control the risks. The implementation of supervision in the workplace sits comfortably under number 3 as a preventative measure. But the structure, content and intention of supervision sessions is in a sense a micro version of this code of practice. So in the course of supervision, we are identifying hazards created by work stresses, assessing the severity or longevity of the issue, and identifying measures to mitigate the issues, controlling the risk through agreeing on a plan of action and reviewing the progress at future sessions. What is supervision? There are many models of supervision, but rather than focusing on just one of them, I've drawn from the commonalities between them. So supervision is a professional, supportive, respectful and trusting partnership, and that partnership is a shared responsibility between the workplace, the employee, the supervisee and the supervisor. Supervision is a structured conversation with an agenda based on the areas of professional practice that are agreed between the supervisor and the supervisee. It's a dedicated space to examine, review and reflect on professional identity and practice. So to ensure quality of work is maintained, growth and continuous improvement are essential. It's an objective place to identify and implement goals, to review action steps and to monitor progress. It's also a space in which to share missteps and mistakes. James Joyce said that mistakes are the portals of discovery, and a sense of trust and confidentiality are really critical to the supervisee feeling able to communicate all aspects of their work performance, particularly when needing to assess negative feedback or an unsatisfactory performance. We really do learn from our mistakes. It's a mechanism for stress relief and self-care. So feeling heard and understood and having an objective person to debrief and problem solve with is an instant stress release in relation to the psychosocial hazards like those we've identified by WorkSafe Australia. Is supervision confidential? It's a question that I'm often asked, and I think understanding confidentiality is really integral to maintaining the integrity of the unique three-way relationship between the workplace, the supervisee and the supervisor. So supervisees have a right to privacy and confidentiality, and they're more likely to share in a productive and frank discussion if they can be reassured of this confidentiality. Exceptions to confidentiality include where matters discussed are subject to mandatory reporting, such as risk to a person's life or safety, or when legally required to report a crime. It is really critical to establish the parameters of confidentiality so that both supervisees and workplaces understand these limitations. If the supervisee is to disclose information that falls under the exceptions to confidentiality, the supervisor will discuss with them their obligations to report and be transparent about the steps they will take in reporting the issues and to whom. They would provide support for the supervisee around the disclosure and the outcomes. You can see there's a couple of questions in the chat there.
It's all right, there's not any questions yet.
Good, that's from you. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. So, what are the principal aims of supervision? Supervision aids with ongoing development to develop and enhance the supervisee's competence and confidence. So reflective conversations really enable the supervisee to develop insight into their practice, to provide a reflective, supportive and safe environment, to assess, explore and identify professional development needs. So identifying professional development needs often arises when gaps in practice or desire for further learning in a specific area emerge from those reflective discussions. To ensure adherence to ethical and professional standards and to improve compliance with organisational processes and requirements. Supervisees are bound by the professional standards and processes of both their profession and their workplace. Supervision can be a space to explore these standards and check understanding around the supervisee's obligations and how practice and their own values meet these obligations. It's also to enhance and maintain wellbeing. So interwoven through all aspects of the supervision narrative is really the drive to support supervisees to optimise their wellbeing, recognising that their professional identity is integral to, but not the whole picture of their wellbeing. What supervision is not? Supervision is not an extension of disciplinary action. Although supervision is generally financed and enabled by workplaces, it is not the supervisor's role to confront or evaluate the employee's performance or underperformance on the employer's behalf, or to give warnings or apply disciplinary action. It's important that supervision is understood to be what it is, an extension of support and a means to development. If the supervisee is undergoing disciplinary action, the supervisor can assist them to manage the emotional and psychological impacts of the situation, develop a plan for improvement, and to explore options for refreshing or extending their skills and knowledge. Supervision is also a detailed inquiry into all aspects of employment and wellbeing, and not a form of micromanagement. Supervisors use many of the basic skills of person-centred counselling, deep and active listening, unconditional positive regard, empathy, observation and problem solving, and these assist the building of that trusting and predictable professional relationship. But the aim of supervision is to provide a holistic work-related session, focusing on optimising performance and wellbeing. If a supervisor identifies that a supervisee would benefit from counselling, they will refer them to an appropriate service. So what does the supervisor bring to the interaction? A supervisor must be ethical, well-informed, knowledgeable in his or her theoretical orientation, clinically skilled, articulate, empathetic, a good listener, gentle, confrontative, accepting, challenging, stimulating, provocative, reassuring, encouraging, possess a good sense of humour, a good sense of timing, be innovative, solid, exciting, laid back, but not all at the same time. I think an effective supervisor must really be able to flow like water with their supervisee's needs. Supervisors need to possess effective communication skills and to build enduring, trusting and productive alliances with the supervisees, demonstrating that they've been heard and understood and that they are valued. They also need to be critical thinkers and expert at engaging supervisees in their own self-development, providing motivation and giving constructive feedback. The supervision relationship is really not a passive one, it's a two-way street, and both participants, both the supervisee and the supervisor, really need to remain curious and committed and engaged in that relationship. So what are the types of supervision? There are three main types of supervision that I'm aware of. Individual supervision provides one-on-one sessions to supervisees at agreed regular intervals. Individual supervision is tailored to the needs of the supervisee and recognises that they may be a beginner at an integration or intermediate stage or at an advanced phase of their career. Individual goals can be set and mapped in this confidential forum, and supervisees are more likely to address the psychosocial hazards that they're experiencing as they can communicate without fear of judgment or retribution. Group supervision is usually offered to work teams who are involved in related service delivery or group projects such as admin teams who are engaged in client-facing work. Supervisors facilitate the input of the group to ensure that all participants can have the opportunity to make a contribution and to ensure the conversation stays on topic. Positives are that teams are accessing collective resources and enhancing communication and collaboration. It can be a great team building and strengthening option. The negatives can be that people may be reluctant to seek support in a group setting and may become further isolated. The facilitator also needs to be really, really mindful and skillful around the group dynamics. Peer supervision involves consultation on agreed topic areas between two or more employees. So it's a reciprocal arrangement where colleagues work together to promote self-directed learning and skills development and to debrief. The benefits of peer supervision are the ease of access and frequency of sessions, so pretty easy to set up if you're doing it in-house. If peer supervision is facilitated well, it can also contribute really well to team culture. The negatives may be that structure and focus can degenerate over time due to dynamics such as a lack of equality, a lack of commitment, or trust in the group. Whatever mode of supervision is chosen, it really requires structure and purpose to be beneficial and progressive. Supervision can also be either externally accessed or internally accessed, depending on whether you prefer to outsource supervision or want to train and provide in-house. So what sort of interventions do supervisors bring to the supervision space? John Heron identifies 6 categories of intervention. The first 3 in the cluster here, prescriptive, informative and confronting, are the more authoritative approaches. And these are more likely to be present when supervisees are in a learning phase and seeking concrete guidance. Supervisors may not be an expert in the supervisee's field, but they can assist them to identify direct mentors in their workplace or externally, correct training, advice, or specific practice wisdom if more support is needed. The last three here, cathartic, catalytic, and supportive, are the facilitative skills. So cathartic meaning creating shifts through expressing thoughts or emotions. Catalytic, assisting the supervisee to become more self-directed and focused through reflection and self-discovery. And supportive, building confidence by bringing awareness to success and positive. I think the latter three categories are more likely to be the flavour of supervision. So what does supervision draw from? There are a number of modalities and influences that have led to the creation of supervision. Let's have a walk through these. So the developmental supervision model sees supervisees in a state of continuous growth and takes into account the self-awareness, autonomy and motivation of supervisees according to whether they're at the beginning, intermediate or advanced phase of their profession or their skill set. Integrative models, from an integrated perspective, the supervisor acts as a teacher, counsellor or consultant, using therapeutic approaches to explore whatever is brought into the supervision space. For example, case management, conceptualisation and personalisation. Supervision really broadly draws from a cross-section of the following therapeutic theories, and supervisors will adapt their skills and approaches according to the stage, needs and personality of the supervisee. So quick look at what these mean. Psychodynamic theory sees human functioning as driven by unconscious internal factors interacting with aspects of someone's persona. So taking a really deep look at who is this person and what's motivating them. Cognitive behavioural therapy looks at strategies for managing thoughts, feelings and behaviour with a view to changing unwanted or unhelpful patterns. Constructivism posits that individuals actively construct their own meaning of life's events. Solution-focused approaches empower people to recognise and develop their own abilities in problem solving. Narrative therapy externalises problems in order to separate individuals from the problem. Systemic therapy looks at the interactions and relationships between group members to help them move forward with issues. And humanistic or person-centred therapy believes in the capacity of individuals for self-growth and change. Goal setting is a really big part of engaging in supervision. Probably everyone is familiar with the SMART acronym. And SMART is a really useful approach for helping supervisees to define what goals they want to achieve and what planning they will put in place to get there. Goals can be set not just at the first supervision session, but at each and every interaction. So specific might be, can the goal be articulated? Are there relevant steps in mind? Measurable, how will they determine success in tangible ways, i.e. increasing a customer base or a ratio of positive feedback? Achievable, whether their goals will be able to be done. Can they achieve them? Do they have the resources and time and support from the workplace to launch or implement a specific project? Can the goal be realistically achieved, or does it need to be reconfigured in scope? And how is the goal relevant within their role? And are they within a realistic time frame that fits with the size of the task? Is the time frame too long or too short? So too long, they may lose momentum. Too short, they're putting too much pressure on themselves and making it unachievable. Dr. Martin Seligman's PERMA theory of wellbeing sets out 5 building blocks that enable people to flourish and is really illustrative of the purpose of supervision. So looking at these, supervision is a practice that supports improvement of positive emotions, including finding ways to cultivate and encourage positivity in daily life. Engagement in meaningful activities and work that fits with our values is critical to wellbeing. When supervisees become disengaged from work, not only productivity declines. Helping employees to identify their strengths and areas of interest can rekindle engagement and interest. Relationships are at the core of wellbeing, whether with colleagues or family and friends. Learning how to nourish these relationships or to create respectful boundaries, healthy ways of communicating, and making strong networks supports psychosocial health and growth. Much of what is discussed in supervision centres on interpersonal relationships, and it is the supervisor's role to promote and demonstrate skill building in this area. Meaning and purpose are often what draws us into our chosen professions, and supervision can be a great space to evaluate meaning in work and expand on that potential. Accomplishment and achieving goals comes through passion and perseverance, plugging away. Part of supervision is to review personal and professional goals, short-term and long-term, and assist supervisees to develop a plan to carry their goals through to accomplishment. So how do we start with supervision? The contracting and expectations are really important. So prior to an initial supervision session, the supervisee will be provided with a contract that details the purpose of supervision, sets out the obligations of both the supervisee and the supervisor, describes how notes will be archived, clarifies the limits of confidentiality, and sets out an expectation of ongoing reflection, feedback, and reviews. This informed consent is the start of the supervisory relationship. Supervision works really well when sessions are able to be scheduled at predictable intervals and spaced accordingly to the supervisee's schedule. So if a person is working 3 days a week, they might benefit from supervision every 6 weeks. Whereas if someone is working full-time, they might attend monthly, but it really depends on their role and how much exposure they're having to really challenging events. Scheduling sessions in advance creates continuity and gives supervisees an opportunity to plan for their supervision sessions. Supervision can be offered face-to-face, via video link, or via phone. I'd certainly say in my case, I have had an increase in supervision due to being able to use Teams, which has been wonderful for reaching supervisees who are living in more remote areas. So defining expectations is really important, and at the initial session, the supervisor will go through the contract to clarify the points and establish the supervisee's understanding of and expectations of the sessions, discuss any past experience of receiving supervision, and identify any concerns. Many supervisees are concerned about the extent of the confidentiality, so whether they can speak frankly about their challenges and whether supervision is really a covert form of scrutiny. Supervisors need to work really quickly to build and to maintain trust, especially where someone might have had a negative experience in the past. Let's have a look at what the sessions look like. So supervision sessions generally cover the following topic areas. It's primarily a place in which to debrief and refuel, but it really is an intentional debrief. And the structure includes looking at professional practice, so exploring and evaluating practice frameworks and skills, excuse me, looking at client or customer cases, identifying values, beliefs, practice wisdom, and identity. The organisational area looks into operational frameworks, workload and workflow, projects, planning, compliance with policy, KPIs, and position descriptions. Professional development includes all aspects of learning and skills development. That can be from immediate needs for upskilling in specific areas through to career planning. It may also be about identifying mentors in the workplace or options for external training. Stress management and support. So self-care is really a major factor in engaging in supervision and a focus of supervision. So it can be looking at individual self-care, workplace and personal relationships, culture and functioning of the team, but also someone's work-life choices and how they're impacting on the holistic life. Let's have a deeper dive into each of these areas. So in terms of professional practice, this really covers all aspects of what we do and how we do it. So our practice is informed by how we comport ourselves in the workplace, our skill base, our understanding of practice frameworks, how we rationalise our decisions and what we draw from in our decision making, our case management skills, and how we navigate ethical dilemmas. Organisational requirements for most of us are the wallpaper of our workday. They bring everything together and underpin the way we approach and adhere to our tasks within our role. Understanding policies and procedures and incorporating them into work practice, managing workload and competing demands through efficiencies in workflow and time management are often a feature of the supervision discussion. Identifying the desire or need for further learning and professional development internally or externally to the workplace ensures that supervisees' skills remain current and informed. In the course of supervision, specific paths of learning may be identified and a plan developed for how to progress in particular areas of theory or practice. Debriefing, aside from providing relief, can also lead to developing a wellbeing strategy so that employees can manage the inevitable challenges of work and life. The support aspect of supervision is really intrinsically woven through the entire professional conversation that takes place in supervision. So debriefing, resilience building, wellness and self-care, building workplace culture and team functioning, providing support and encouragement and motivation, focusing on a person's values and ethics and the values and ethics of the organisation, looking at stress mitigation, and also celebrating accomplishment and success. Supervisors might use a template similar to the one on your screen to capture the content of supervision. It just provides the structure for the session and is a great way to also check back over what areas mainly you have spent time in and if there are any areas that are sort of missing out in that conversation. And as a supervisor, it's my practice to conclude sessions with an inquiry about what the supervisor will take from the session in terms of insight and learning. And if there is any kind of resulting action that needs to be taken by either the supervisee or the supervisor. So that could be agreeing to look at a particular set of courses or sending a reference or sending a resource through to somebody that might be helpful for them. And in the following session, the supervisee would check back with the supervisor about the progress of that. Ethical dilemmas are a very common feature in supervision. I think as employees, we're often faced with ethical dilemmas at work, and these can take the form of a difficult dynamic within our work team, a clash of values with a particular staff member, a concern about standards of work, or an incident that's occurred with a client or a customer. And ideally, these are discussed with a relevant senior staff member in the moment, but at times where the issue is more complex or ongoing, employees will bring these dilemmas to supervision. And so the supervisee would assist the supervisor to deconstruct the dilemma and describe the what happened story. So a supervisor might ask, for example, in relation to an incident described. If I had been witness to that incident, what would I have noticed? They assist with the identification of thoughts and emotions at the same time. Supervisors may ask, what values impacted on your feelings in that situation? What skills did you use to resolve the problem? Identifying any new learning from the situation. So were there any new insights or possible explanations or rationales in hindsight? So you might ask, now that you've reflected on the situation, how do you evaluate it in hindsight? Describe how they might respond in future. So a question could be, how will you apply the learning and insight in a new situation? And to develop a plan for self-care around the ethical dilemma. So question might be, what is this issue meant for your well-being, and what action could you take to address this? So what are the barriers to supervision? Newcastle University's 2019 report lists these as the common barriers to receiving or engaging in supervision. So lack of time and resources. I'm sure there's a collective sigh in the audience as you recognise that phenomenon. Heavy workloads can sometimes mean that people perceive they cannot stop work and access supervision. So if organisations decide to implement supervision, it really needs to become an expected part of the work schedule. A lack of management or organisational support. The manager's personal view of supervision is found to have an impact on uptake and participation. It's pretty difficult to access supervision if you don't feel that that's supported. And in terms of organisational support, cost or administrative burdens can also pose challenges. Lack of access to skilled supervisors and a lack of focus in existing forums can lead to disengagement and low confidence. Where supervisees use sessions, for example, to personally vent about workplace or workload or conditions, and structure and guidance were missing, the purpose can be lost. Whether supervision is one-on-one or with a group, that sense of mutual trust, you keep hearing me repeating that, is really critical to how well these sessions work and to the depth of sharing and risk-taking which is necessary to springboard learning and growth. Contextual factors such as a lack of staff coverage or access to supervision for those not working business hours can also mean that supervision is not always accessed equally, and this can create resentment in the workplace. It's really important to offer options to all staff if you're implementing supervision. The benefits of supervision are higher job satisfaction, enhanced staff retention, improved confidence and initiative, improved working environment and team morale, improved quality of service delivery, improved communication strategies, alleviation of stress, and safeguards against worker burnout. So let's come back to the code of practice. So the decision to adopt supervision as a means to manage psychosocial hazards is really an accessible option for most workplaces, particularly with those three models of either individual, peer, or group supervision. Deciding which model fits for your teams, implementing supporting resources such as supervision fact sheets and supervision contracts, creating a space in the work diary for regular sessions and a space that people can attend from if it's individual supervision, and also an expectation that these will be attended and the time will be utilised. Being clear about the confidentiality and the purpose are all ways to set up supervision to safeguard against psychosocial risk. Okay, thank you for listening. I'm sorry you can't see my face again, but if there are any questions, I would love to hear from you.
We do have a few in the chat,
Excellent.
but if anyone wants to unmute and ask first, then we can go through the chat ones afterwards.
Okay, let's have a look at the chat. Would an in-house supervisor need a clinical qualification